Isaiah Walker thought burying his wife was the hardest thing he'd ever face, until her wealthy family turned her funeral into a public humiliation, whispering that he was never good enough, that their daughter had thrown her life away on a bus mechanic who couldn't even afford a proper goodbye. Standing at the graveside with his two young children watching, he endured every cruel comment, every judgmental stare, every whispered suggestion that maybe the kids would be better off without him. But what Margaret Holloway and her upper-class family didn't know was that Ruth had left something behind, a letter that would shatter every assumption they'd ever made and reveal a love story they never understood. This is the story of a man who proved his worth not with money or status, but with a single piece of paper that changed everything. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're from, because this journey of dignity, grief, and unexpected vindication will stay with you long after it ends. The alarm didn't go off because Isaiah forgot to set it. He woke up anyway. His eyes opened to darkness that felt different than usual, heavier, colder. The space beside him in the bed was empty, and this time it wasn't temporary. This time, Ruth wasn't coming back from a night shift or a doctor's appointment. This time, the emptiness was permanent. Isaiah lay still and stared at the ceiling he couldn't see. His chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped chains around his ribs and pulled them too close together. He tried to breathe normally but couldn't quite manage it. Today was the funeral. The thought hit him like a physical thing, heavy and sharp and unavoidable. He turned his head and looked at the clock on the nightstand. 4:37 in the morning. Too early to get up, too late to fall back asleep. He lay there in the space between night and morning, between the life he'd had and the one he was about to face. From down the hall, he heard a sound. Small feet on the floor, a door opening. Nia appeared in his doorway, clutching her stuffed elephant. Her hair stuck up in every direction. Her eyes were puffy from crying in her sleep. "Daddy?" Her voice was so small. "Come here, baby girl." She ran to the bed and climbed up, burrowing into his side. Isaiah wrapped his arms around her and felt her small body shaking with silent tears. "I had a bad dream," she whispered. "Mama was gone, and I couldn't find her." Isaiah's throat closed up. He kissed the top of her head and held her tighter. "I know, baby. I know." They lay there together as the darkness slowly gave way to gray morning light. Isaiah didn't know how long they stayed like that. 5 minutes, 20. Time felt strange and unreliable. Eventually, he heard another door open. Eli's footsteps were heavier, more measured. He appeared in the doorway but didn't come in right away. "I'm awake," Eli said. His voice was careful, controlled. 9 years old and already trying to be the man of the house. "Come here, buddy." Eli walked over and sat on the edge of the bed. He didn't cry. Hadn't cried since the hospital. Just sat there with his hands folded in his lap, looking older than he should. Isaiah reached out and pulled him close. Now he had both his children pressed against him, and for a moment he could pretend they were just having a lazy morning. That Ruth would walk in any minute with coffee and tell them all to get up because breakfast was ready, but she wouldn't. She never would again. "We have to get ready," Isaiah said quietly. "Big day today?" Nia whimpered. Eli just nodded. Isaiah got up and turned on the light. The sudden brightness felt harsh. Wrong. He walked to the closet and pulled out the clothes he'd laid out last night. The dark suit Ruth had helped him pick out 3 years ago for a cousin's wedding. The white shirt she'd ironed because she said he never got the collar right. The tie she'd given him for his birthday. His hands shook as he held the tie. He couldn't remember how to do this. The knot, the loop, the pull through. It had been so long since he'd worn it, and Ruth had always been there to fix it when he messed up. He tried 3 times and failed. On the 4th try, his vision blurred with tears and he had to sit down on the bed. Eli watched from the doorway. "Dad?" "I'm okay, buddy. Just give me a minute." "I can help." Mama showed me once. Isaiah looked at his 9-year-old son standing there with his shoulders square and his jaw set. Too young. Way too young for this. Okay, Isaiah said. Show me. Eli came over and took the tie. His small hands moved carefully, deliberately. He got it wrong the first time. Tried again. On the third attempt, he got it close enough. There, Eli said softly. Mama would say that's good enough. Isaiah pulled his son into a hug and tried not to break down completely. They got dressed slowly. Isaiah helped Nia into the navy blue dress Ruth had bought her for Easter. He brushed her hair as gently as he could, trying to remember how Ruth did it. Nia cried a little when he pulled too hard on a tangle. Sorry, baby. I'm sorry. It's okay, Daddy. You're doing good. Those words hit him harder than they should have. 5 years old and already comforting him. Eli dressed himself in the dark pants and white shirt Ruth had picked out the week before she died, before the hospital, before everything fell apart. Isaiah looked at his children standing in the hallway of their small apartment. They looked so grown up, so scared, so brave. You two ready? He asked. They nodded. Okay, let's go. They held hands walking down the stairs, Nia in the middle, gripping both their hands tight. Isaiah carried the weight of what was coming and tried not to stumble. The car was old. A 15-year-old sedan with a dent in the back bumper and a radio that only worked half the time. Isaiah had been meaning to get it fixed for months, but there was never enough money, never enough time. He buckled Nia into her booster seat and made sure Eli's seatbelt was secure. Then he got in the driver's seat and sat there for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. He could do this. He had to do this. Isaiah started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. The city was quiet this early on a Saturday morning, a few cars on the road, a few people waiting at bus stops. Life continuing like nothing had changed, even though everything had. The radio came on when he hit a pothole. A song played. Something soft and old. Ruth's favorite. Isaiah's hand moved to turn it off, then stopped. This was her song. The one she hummed while cooking dinner. The one she sang to the kids at bedtime. He left it on. Mama loved this song, Nia said from the back seat. Yeah, baby, she did. They drove in silence except for the music. Isaiah watched the streets pass by and remembered. The hospital, the doctors with their careful voices, the machines beeping, Ruth's hand getting weaker in his. Dad? Eli's voice pulled him back. How long do funerals last? I don't know, buddy. A couple hours, maybe. Will a lot of people be there? I think so. Your mama knew a lot of people. Will Grandma and Grandpa be there? Isaiah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Yeah, they'll be there. Eli was quiet for a moment. Then, they don't like you, do they? Isaiah glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. Too perceptive. Always had been. They're just different from us, buddy, that's all. But they're mean to you. Sometimes people say things when they're hurting. They loved your mama a lot. They're sad, just like us. Eli didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. The funeral home came into view. A low brick building with white columns and a manicured lawn. Cars were already in the parking lot. Expensive cars, new cars. Cars that made Isaiah's old sedan look even more worn out. He pulled into a spot at the back and turned off the engine. The radio cut out mid-song. For a moment, none of them moved. I don't want to go in, Nia whispered. I know, baby girl, but we have to. We have to say goodbye to Mama. What if I'm not ready? Isaiah turned around in his seat and looked at his daughter. Tears streamed down her face. Her bottom lip trembled. None of us are ready, he said gently. But we're going to do it together, okay? All three of us. We're going to hold hands and we're going to be brave for Mama. Nia nodded and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Isaiah got out and opened the back doors. He helped Nia out of her booster seat and took both children's hands. Remember, he said quietly. We're strong. We're the Walkers. And we stick together no matter what. No matter what, Eli repeated. No matter what, Nia echoed. They walked across the parking lot toward the funeral home. With each step, Isaiah felt the weight of what was coming. The looks, the whispers, the judgment. He knew what Ruth's family thought of him. A bus mechanic who worked with his hands and came home dirty. A man from the wrong part of town with the wrong kind of job and not enough money. A man who wasn't good enough for their daughter. They'd never said it directly, not to his face, but he'd heard the comments, seen the looks, felt the coldness. And today, at the lowest moment of his life, he'd have to face them all while burying the woman he loved. Isaiah squeezed his children's hands and pushed open the funeral home doors. Inside, the air smelled like flowers and furniture polish. Too many flowers. Arrangements on every surface, filling the room with their heavy, cloying scent. People stood in clusters, talking in low voices. Most of them Isaiah didn't recognize. Ruth's work friends, her college roommates, people from the life she'd had before him. And there, near the front, stood the Holloways. Margaret Holloway wore a black dress that probably cost more than Isaiah's rent. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was perfect. Everything about her screamed money and status and control. Thomas Holloway stood beside his wife in an expensive suit. He looked uncomfortable. He always looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. And Grace, Ruth's younger sister, stood slightly apart from her parents. She wore black too, but simpler, less showy. Her eyes were red from crying. Margaret saw Isaiah first. Her gaze moved from his face to his suit, to his children. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Judgment, disappointment, disdain. Isaiah walked toward them with his head up and his children close. Margaret, Thomas. He nodded to each of them. Isaiah. Margaret's voice was cool, controlled. She looked down at Eli and Nia but didn't kneel to their level, didn't reach out to touch them. Children. Hi, Grandma, Nia said quietly. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Hello, dear. You've grown. It had been 6 months since Margaret and Thomas had visited. 6 months since they'd seen their grandchildren. They'd been too busy, they said. Too much work. Too many commitments. Thomas cleared his throat. The service will start soon. We should find our seats. Actually, Margaret said, we need to discuss the arrangements. Isaiah, did you coordinate with the funeral director about the flowers? I sent specific instructions. I followed Ruth's wishes, Isaiah said quietly. Everything is how she wanted it. Ruth's wishes? Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. I'm her mother. I think I know what would be appropriate. Isaiah felt Eli's hand tighten in his, felt his son watching, learning, seeing how his father would respond. With respect, Margaret, Ruth told me exactly what she wanted. I'm honoring that. I see. Margaret's tone said she didn't agree. Well, we'll discuss this later. Come along, Thomas. She walked away without acknowledging the children again. Thomas followed, but he glanced back at Isaiah with something that might have been sympathy. Grace lingered. She looked at Isaiah, then at the kids. I'm sorry for your loss, she said softly. Both of you. Your mama loved you so much. Thank you, Grace, Isaiah said. She nodded and walked away, leaving Isaiah and the children standing alone in the crowded room. I don't like Grandma, Nia whispered. She's just sad, baby, remember? People act different when they're sad. She was like that before Mama died, too, Eli said. Isaiah didn't have a response to that because Eli was right. They made their way through the room. People offered condolences, touched Isaiah's shoulder, said kind things about Ruth. But he also heard the whispers, caught the looks. A woman in pearls leaned close to her friend. Can you believe the funeral home? So simple. an older man in an expensive suit. I always wondered what she saw in him. A younger woman Isaiah didn't recognize. Those poor children. What will happen to them now? Each comment landed like a small cut. Not deep enough to kill, but enough to hurt. Enough to remind Isaiah that he didn't belong here, that he'd never belonged. He kept his face neutral, kept his children close, kept moving forward. The funeral director appeared and guided them toward the viewing room. Isaiah's stomach clenched. He wasn't ready for this, wasn't ready to see Ruth lying there, still and cold, and not her anymore. But Eli and Nia were watching him, trusting him to lead, to be strong. Isaiah walked into the viewing room. The casket sat at the front, surrounded by more flowers. Simple wood, like Ruth wanted. No elaborate carvings or gold handles, just clean lines and honest wood. Isaiah approached slowly. His children stayed close on either side. And there she was, Ruth, his wife, the mother of his children, the woman who'd chosen him when everyone else said she shouldn't. She looked peaceful. That's what people said, right? She looks peaceful. But she didn't. She just looked gone. Isaiah stood there and tried to say goodbye. Tried to find words that would capture everything he felt. Everything they'd been. Everything they'd never get to be. But there were no words. Just a hollow ache in his chest, where his heart used to be. "Bye, Mama," Nia whispered. She reached out and touched the casket gently. "I love you." Eli didn't say anything, just stood there with tears running down his face, silent and stoic. Isaiah put his arms around both children and held them while they cried. Behind them, Margaret's voice cut through the quiet. "I do hope the music selection is appropriate. Ruth had such refined taste." Isaiah's jaw tightened. He didn't turn around, didn't respond, just held his children and tried to be what they needed. The funeral director announced that the service would begin in 10 minutes. People started finding their seats. Isaiah guided Eli and Nia to the front row, their row, the family row. Margaret appeared beside them. "Actually, Isaiah, family sits here. Perhaps you and the children would be more comfortable in the second row." Isaiah looked at her, at this woman who'd never thought he was good enough, who'd made Ruth's life harder by refusing to accept him, who was now at his wife's funeral trying to push him aside. "We're family," Isaiah said quietly. "This is where we sit." Margaret's nostrils flared. "I hardly think—" "Ruth was my wife. These are her children. We sit here." For a moment, they locked eyes. Margaret's gaze was ice. Isaiah's was steel. Finally, Margaret sniffed and moved to sit on the other end of the row. Thomas followed without a word. Grace hesitated, then sat between her parents and Isaiah's family. The service began. The minister spoke about Ruth's life, her kindness, her dedication to her work, her love for her family. But he didn't know her. Not really. He spoke in generalities and platitudes that could have been about anyone. Then came the music. The song Isaiah had chosen, Ruth's favorite, an old gospel song her grandmother used to sing. The opening notes filled the chapel. Margaret stiffened in her seat, turned to look at Isaiah with barely concealed anger. This wasn't refined. This wasn't appropriate. This wasn't what the Holloways would have chosen. But it was what Ruth wanted. Isaiah sat with his children and listened to his wife's song, and for the first time since she died, he felt close to her again. Grace pulled a tissue from her purse and cried quietly. Thomas looked at the floor. Margaret sat rigid and disapproving. And Isaiah realized something. They'd never really known Ruth. Not the Ruth he knew. Not the woman who sang gospel songs while cooking. Not the woman who chose love over money. Not the woman who'd rather have a simple life with him than a comfortable one without him. They'd known the version of Ruth they wanted her to be, but not who she really was. The song ended. The minister invited people to share memories. Margaret rose and walked to the podium. She spoke about Ruth's education, her accomplishments, her potential. She spoke about the life Ruth could have had, should have had. Never once did she mention Isaiah, or the children, or the family Ruth had chosen. People shifted uncomfortably. A few glanced at Isaiah. He sat still and listened and felt Eli's hand slip into his. Margaret finished and returned to her seat, looking satisfied. The minister asked if anyone else wanted to speak. Silence. Then Grace stood. She walked to the podium and looked out at the room. "My sister," she began, her voice shaking, "was the kindest person I ever knew. She saw the good in everyone. She loved fiercely and completely, and she made her own choices about the life she wanted to live." Grace's eyes found Isaiah's. She chose love, real love, the kind that shows up every day, the kind that doesn't care about money or status or what other people think. And I'm grateful she had that, even if it was too short. She sat down quickly, wiping her eyes. Margaret's face was stone. Thomas looked like he might cry, and Isaiah held his children's hands and tried to breathe. The service ended with a prayer and an invitation to the cemetery. People stood slowly, gathering their things, murmuring to each other in hushed tones. Isaiah stayed seated with Eli and Nia pressed close on either side. He wasn't ready to move, wasn't ready for the next part, the final part. "Dad," Eli's voice was small, "do we have to go to the cemetery?" "Yeah, buddy, we do. I don't want to." "I know, me neither. But we're going to do it together. Remember?" Eli nodded but didn't look convinced. People filed past them, offering condolences as they went, some genuine, some obligatory. Isaiah nodded and thanked them and tried to keep his composure. Margaret appeared in front of him. Thomas stood slightly behind her, looking uncomfortable as always. "We'll lead the procession to the cemetery," Margaret said. It wasn't a question. "Our car will go first, then yours." Isaiah stood, keeping his children close. "Actually, the hearse goes first. That's how it works." Margaret's lips thinned. "I'm aware of funeral protocol, Isaiah. I meant after the hearse." "We'll follow the hearse," Isaiah said quietly, "like we're supposed to." "Really, Isaiah, this is hardly the time for—" "Mom." Grace appeared beside her mother. "Let it go, please." Margaret looked at her daughter with surprise, then back at Isaiah. For a moment, something flickered across her face, something that might have been grief or regret, or just exhaustion. "Fine," she said curtly. "We'll see you there." She walked away with Thomas trailing behind her. Grace lingered for a moment. "I meant what I said," she told Isaiah. "About Ruth choosing love. She was happy with you. I hope you know that." Isaiah's throat tightened. "Thank you, Grace." She nodded and followed her parents out. The funeral director approached. "Mr. Walker, we're ready when you are." Isaiah looked down at his children. Nia's eyes were red and swollen. Eli's jaw was set in that way that meant he was fighting tears. "Okay," Isaiah said. "Let's go." The drive to the cemetery was slow, a procession of cars with their headlights on, moving through the city like a sad parade. Isaiah's old sedan rattled and hummed, making sounds it probably shouldn't. He followed the hearse down familiar streets, past the bus depot where he worked, past the park where he'd proposed to Ruth, past the clinic where Nia was born. Every landmark a memory. Every corner a reminder of the life they'd built together. "Dad?" Eli's voice came from the back seat. "What's going to happen to us?" Isaiah glanced in the rearview mirror. "What do you mean?" "Grandma said something about our future, about making sure we were taken care of properly." Isaiah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Of course Margaret had said something. Of course she'd planted that seed of doubt. "Nothing's going to happen to you," Isaiah said firmly. "You're staying with me. We're staying together." "But what if Grandma wants us to live with her?" "That's not going to happen." "How do you know?" "Because you're my children." Ruth was my wife, and nobody gets to take you away from me. Isaiah heard the edge in his own voice, tried to soften it. I'm your dad, buddy. That doesn't change, no matter what anyone says. Eli was quiet for a moment. Okay, but Isaiah could hear the doubt, could feel it hanging in the air between them. Nia spoke up, her voice small and scared. I want to stay with you, Daddy. You will, baby girl, I promise. He hoped it was a promise he could keep. The cemetery came into view. Rows of headstones stretching across manicured grass, trees providing shade, a peaceful place, if you could call any cemetery peaceful. The procession wound its way through the gates and along a narrow road to a spot near the back. Isaiah parked behind the hearse and turned off the engine. For a moment, they all just sat there. I'm scared, Nia whispered. Me too, baby. But we're going to be brave for Mama, remember? What if I can't be brave? Isaiah turned around in his seat and looked at his daughter, 5 years old and facing something no child should have to face. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, he said gently. It means you do it anyway, and you don't have to do it alone. You've got me and Eli. We're going to hold on to each other, and we're going to get through this. Nia nodded, tears streaming down her face. Isaiah got out and opened the back doors. He helped Nia out of her booster seat and took both children's hands. People were gathering around a green canopy that had been set up near a freshly dug grave. Isaiah tried not to look at the hole in the ground, tried not to think about what it meant. They walked toward the gathering slowly. Isaiah felt every eye on them, felt the weight of judgment and pity and curiosity. Margaret stood near the front with Thomas. Her face was composed, controlled. Whatever grief she felt, she kept it locked away behind a mask of propriety. Grace stood a little apart, her eyes red from crying. The minister waited by the graveside, his Bible open in his hands. Isaiah led his children to the front row of chairs. They sat down together, hands still clasped. The casket was carried from the hearse and placed on supports above the grave. Ruth's casket, simple wood, honest and plain, just like she wanted. Margaret leaned toward Thomas and said something Isaiah couldn't hear. Thomas nodded without looking at her. The minister began to speak. Words about dust and ashes, about eternal rest, about God's mercy and love. Isaiah tried to listen, but the words seemed to come from very far away. All he could focus on was the casket, the flowers on top, the reality that Ruth was inside, and in a few minutes, she'd be lowered into the ground and covered with earth, and that would be the end. Eli's hand gripped his tighter. Nia leaned her head against his arm. The minister finished his opening prayer and looked out at the gathered mourners. At this time, we'll have a moment of silence for personal reflection and prayer. The crowd fell quiet. Birds sang in nearby trees. Wind rustled through leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower hummed. Isaiah closed his eyes and tried to pray, tried to find words, but all he could think was not fair, not fair, not fair. Ruth was only 34. They were supposed to have decades together, supposed to watch their children grow up, supposed to grow old side by side. Not this. Not a cemetery on a Saturday morning. Not a hole in the ground and a casket, and goodbye. The silence stretched. Isaiah opened his eyes and saw Margaret watching him. Her expression was cold, assessing. Then she stood up. The minister looked surprised but gestured for her to approach. Margaret walked to the front and turned to face the crowd. She looked composed, in control, every inch the grieving mother. I want to thank you all for coming, she began. Her voice was steady, strong. Ruth was a remarkable woman. She had so much potential, so much promise. Isaiah felt a prickle of unease. She could have done anything, Margaret continued. Been anything. She was intelligent, accomplished, well-connected. She had opportunities that most people only dream of. People shifted in their seats. A few glanced at Isaiah. But she chose a different path. Margaret's gaze flickered to Isaiah, then away. She chose simplicity, a quiet life. And while I'm sure she found some happiness in that choice, I can't help but wonder what might have been, what she might have accomplished if... She trailed off, leaving the implication hanging in the air. If she hadn't married him, if she hadn't settled, if she'd listened to us. Isaiah felt heat rising in his chest, felt anger mixing with grief and humiliation. Eli's hand trembled in his. His son was watching, learning, seeing how his father was being treated at the worst moment of his life. Margaret finished with a few more comments about Ruth's childhood and her accomplishments before marriage. Then she returned to her seat, looking satisfied. The minister cleared his throat. "Thank you, Margaret. Would anyone else like to—" "Yes." Thomas stood up suddenly. His wife looked at him in surprise. Thomas walked to the front. He looked out at the crowd, then down at his hands. "My daughter," he said quietly, "loved her family. Both of her families." He glanced at Isaiah. She loved deeply and completely. And she made her own choices. As her father, I have to respect that. Even when I didn't understand. Even when I wished things were different. His voice cracked. He paused to compose himself. Ruth was happy. I saw it every time we visited, every phone call, every Christmas. She was truly, genuinely happy. And that's all any parent can really want for their child. He sat down quickly. Margaret stared at him like he'd betrayed her. The minister looked around. Anyone else? Silence. Then, I'd like to say something. Isaiah looked up in surprise. Grace had stood. She walked to the front, wiping her eyes. She looked at Isaiah and the children, then out at the crowd. My sister and I were best friends, Grace said. Her voice shook, but held. We told each other everything. And when she met Isaiah, she called me the same night. She said, Grace, I met someone real, someone who sees me, not just the version of me that fits into everyone's expectations. Margaret's face hardened. Grace continued. She told me she was going to marry him. I said it was too fast, that she didn't know him well enough, that Mom and Dad would never approve. Grace smiled sadly. And you know what she said? She said, I don't need approval, I need love. And that's what I found. A few people nodded. Someone in the back said, Amen. Ruth knew exactly what she was doing, Grace said. She chose the life she wanted, the love she wanted, and I watched her be happier than I'd ever seen her. So whatever anyone else thinks about her choices, I know the truth. She had exactly the life she wanted, with exactly the person she wanted. Grace looked directly at Isaiah. Thank you for loving my sister the way she deserved to be loved. She sat down, crying openly now. The minister looked around one more time. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Isaiah felt people's eyes on him, felt the expectation, the invitation. But what could he say? What words could possibly capture what Ruth had meant to him, what they'd built together? He started to shake his head when Eli spoke up. My dad should say something. Everyone turned to look at the 9-year-old boy. Buddy, I don't think... Please, Dad, you should. For Mama. Isaiah looked at his son's earnest face, at Nia nodding in agreement, at Grace watching him with encouragement in her eyes, at Margaret's cold, challenging stare. His hands started shaking. His heart pounded. He wasn't good with words, wasn't good with public speaking. He fixed buses for a living, got his hands dirty, came home exhausted. But Ruth had chosen him anyway, and maybe it was time to remind everyone why. Isaiah stood up slowly. His legs felt unsteady. The walk to the front of the gathering felt like miles. He turned and faced the crowd, familiar faces and strangers. People who'd known Ruth and people who'd only known about her. Margaret's cold disapproval, Thomas's conflicted sympathy, Grace's wet eyes, and his children, watching him, trusting him, needing him to be strong. Isaiah reached into his jacket pocket. His fingers found the envelope he'd carried there since Ruth died. The letter she'd written him 6 months ago, when she first got sick, when she knew she might not have much time. He pulled it out with shaking hands. "Ruth left me a letter," he said. His voice came out rough, quiet. She wrote it when she was still healthy enough to hold a pen, when she still thought maybe the treatment would work. He unfolded the paper carefully. The creases were worn from him reading it over and over in the hospital, in the quiet hours of the night, in moments when he thought he couldn't go on. "She wrote it for me," Isaiah continued. "But she told me to read it out loud if I ever needed people to understand. I think now is that time." Margaret shifted in her seat, uncomfortable, already disapproving. Isaiah looked down at Ruth's handwriting, familiar loops and curves, her words in her hand. He began to read. "My dearest Isaiah, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I'm so sorry. I know you're hurting. I know the kids are scared. I know you feel alone." His voice cracked. He paused, swallowed, continued. "But I need you to know something, to really know it, deep in your heart. Choosing you was the best decision I ever made. Not the easiest, not the one everyone approved of, but the best." Isaiah heard someone gasp softly, heard Margaret's sharp intake of breath. "When I met you, I was living the life everyone expected, the right job, the right friends, the right path, but I wasn't happy. I was performing, pretending, playing a role that was never really me." He looked up briefly, saw Grace nodding, saw Thomas's face crumbling. "You saw me, Isaiah, the real me, the me who sang gospel songs and wanted simplicity and didn't care about impressing anyone. You loved that version of me, the one my family couldn't understand." Margaret stood up abruptly. "This is inappropriate." "Let him finish." Thomas's voice was sharp, firmer than Isaiah had ever heard it. "For once, Margaret, just listen." Margaret sat down slowly, her face flushed with anger. Isaiah continued reading. "I know my mother never approved. I know she thought I was settling, throwing away potential, but she didn't understand that potential means nothing if you're miserable. I had a big career and nice things and the right connections, and I was empty." His hands trembled as he turned the page. "With you, I had something real. Love that showed up every day. A partner who valued me, not my resume. Children we made together, a life we built from scratch, with our own hands and hearts." Nia was crying quietly in her seat. Eli sat rigid, his face wet with tears he wouldn't let fall. "So if anyone ever questions the choices I made, read them this. Tell them I regret nothing. Tell them I was happier washing dishes in our tiny apartment than I ever was in my parents' big house. Tell them that love, real, honest, everyday love, is worth more than anything money can buy." Isaiah's voice broke completely. He had to stop, had to breathe, had to wipe his eyes before he could continue. "Tell our children their father is a good man, the best man. Tell them I chose him with my whole heart and never once doubted that choice." He looked up at his kids, at their faces, so young and so full of pain. "And tell Isaiah, tell my love, that he gave me everything that mattered, that our simple life was my greatest achievement, that the years we had, however few, were worth everything." The paper shook in his hands as he read the final lines. "I love you. I love our children. I love the life we made, and I wouldn't change a single thing, not one single thing. Forever yours, Ruth." Silence fell over the cemetery. Complete. Total. Absolute silence. Isaiah folded the letter carefully and put it back in his pocket. He looked out at the gathered crowd. Margaret's face was pale. Her carefully composed mask had cracked. Tears ran down her cheeks, though she tried to hide them. Thomas wept openly, his shoulders shaking. Grace had her hand over her mouth, her whole body trembling with sobs. And everyone else, all the people who'd whispered and judged and questioned, sat in stunned silence. Isaiah walked back to his children and sat down between them. He took their hands in his. The minister cleared his throat. "Let us pray." The final prayer washed over Isaiah without really landing. He was too numb, too raw, too empty. When it was over, the funeral director stepped forward to lower the casket. The mechanism whirred softly as Ruth's casket descended into the earth. Nia buried her face in Isaiah's side. Eli watched with dry eyes that held too much pain for a 9-year-old. People stood and began to leave. Some stopped to speak to Isaiah, to shake his hand, to apologize without saying the words. Grace came over and knelt in front of the children. "Your mama loved you so much," she told them. "And your dad is right. You're going to be okay, all 3 of you." She looked up at Isaiah. "I'm sorry for everything, for not speaking up sooner, for letting them." "It's okay," Isaiah said quietly. "It's not, but thank you." She squeezed his hand and walked away. Thomas approached next. He looked smaller somehow, older. "Isaiah," he said. His voice was hoarse. We... He couldn't finish. Just shook his head and walked away, his shoulders hunched with shame. Finally, Margaret stood before them. She looked at Isaiah with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not cold anymore, not disapproving. Something else, something complicated. "We need to talk," she said. "About the children. About their future." Isaiah stood slowly, keeping his children close. "Their future is with me." I wasn't suggesting otherwise. Margaret's voice was stiff, formal. "But we should discuss arrangements, schooling, support." "We'll talk," Isaiah said, "but not today." Margaret nodded. She looked down at Eli and Nia. For the first time, she seemed to really see them. Her grandchildren. Ruth's children. "Goodbye," she said softly. Then she turned and walked away to where her car waited. Isaiah and his children stood alone by the grave as the cemetery workers began to fill it in. "Can we go home now, Daddy?" Nia asked. "Yeah, baby girl. Let's go home." They walked back to the car together, hands linked, holding each other up. Isaiah helped them into their seats and got behind the wheel. He started the car and pulled out of the cemetery, leaving Ruth behind in the earth. The drive home was quiet. Eli stared out the window. Nia fell asleep, exhausted from grief. Isaiah drove and tried not to think about everything that had happened, the whispers, the judgment, Margaret's public dismissal of his worth, the letter that had finally silenced them all. He'd defended Ruth's choice, defended their life, defended the love they'd shared. But the cost of that defense had been exposing his own heart, making himself vulnerable in front of everyone. And now he had to figure out how to keep going, how to raise 2 children alone, how to be enough when he'd never felt like enough even when Ruth was alive. The apartment building came into view. Home. Their small, simple home. Isaiah parked and turned off the engine. He looked at his children in the rearview mirror. Nia still slept. Eli met his eyes. "You okay, buddy?" "Are you?" Isaiah thought about lying, about saying yes, about being strong, but he was tired of pretending. "No," he said honestly. "I'm not okay, but I will be. We all will be." Eli nodded slowly. "Dad?" "Yeah? That letter Mama wrote, she was right. About you being good, about everything." Isaiah's throat closed up. "Thanks, buddy. I mean it. Don't let Grandma make you think different. 9 years old, too wise, too aware." "I won't," Isaiah promised. They went inside together, climbing the stairs to their apartment, their home, the life Ruth had chosen and loved and never regretted. And somehow, some way, Isaiah would find the strength to honor that choice, to keep going, to be the father his children needed, to be the man Ruth had believed he was, even when it felt impossible, especially then. The apartment felt different when they walked in, quieter, emptier, like the walls themselves knew Ruth was gone. Isaiah locked the door behind them and stood in the small entryway, suddenly unsure what to do next. What came after a funeral? What were you supposed to do when you buried your wife and came home to an apartment that still smelled like her shampoo? Nia tugged on his hand. "Daddy, I'm hungry." Isaiah looked down at his daughter. Right. Food. Children needed food. "Okay, baby. Let me see what we have." He walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Neighbors had brought food over the past week. Casseroles and soups and dishes he didn't know the names of, all sitting in mismatched containers with sympathy notes attached. He pulled out something that looked like chicken and rice, put it in the microwave, watched the plate spin while the numbers counted down. Eli appeared in the doorway. He'd changed out of his funeral clothes into jeans and a t-shirt. He looked more like himself, younger. "Dad, can I watch TV?" "Yeah, buddy. Whatever you want." Eli disappeared into the living room. Isaiah heard the television come on. Some cartoon with bright voices and cheerful music. Too cheerful for today. But if it helped, then okay. The microwave beeped. Isaiah pulled out the plate and divided it onto 3 smaller plates. He brought them to the living room coffee table where Eli was already curled up on the couch. "Nia, come eat." His daughter emerged from the bedroom wearing her favorite pink pajamas. She climbed onto the couch next to Eli and picked at her food without much interest. Isaiah sat down with them and tried to eat. The food tasted like nothing, like cardboard. But he chewed and swallowed because the kids were watching and he needed to set an example. They ate in silence with the TV playing in the background. When they finished, Isaiah collected the plates and took them to the kitchen. He stood at the sink washing dishes and looking out the window at the building across the street. Normal Saturday afternoon. People coming and going. Life continuing. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He dried his hands and pulled it out. A text from Grace. "Thank you for today. For Ruth's letter. For everything. Call me if you need anything." Isaiah typed back, "Thank you." Another text came in, from a number he didn't recognize at first, then realized it was Thomas. "We were wrong about many things. I'm sorry." Isaiah stared at the message. An apology. From Thomas. Not from Margaret, but it was something. He didn't respond. Didn't know what to say. Just put the phone back in his pocket and finished the dishes. When he returned to the living room, both kids had fallen asleep on the couch. Nia was curled against Eli's side. Eli's head was tilted back, mouth slightly open. Isaiah stood and watched them sleep, his children, his responsibility, his whole world now. The weight of it hit him all at once, the enormity of raising them alone, of being mother and father both, of being enough when he'd always felt like he was barely keeping up even with Ruth's help. He sat down in the armchair and put his head in his hands. How was he supposed to do this? Ruth had been the one who helped with homework, who knew what to do when they were sick, who remembered permission slips and doctor's appointments and all the 1,000 small things that kept a family running. Isaiah worked long hours at the bus depot, came home tired and dirty. He played with the kids and read them bedtime stories and loved them fiercely. But Ruth had been the steady one, the organized one, the one who held everything together. And now she was gone. Isaiah felt tears coming and didn't try to stop them. Just sat in the quiet apartment with his sleeping children and let himself break down. He cried for Ruth, for the years they'd never have, for the life they'd built that was now shattered. He cried for his kids, for the loss they'd carry forever, for having to grow up without their mother. And he cried for himself, for the loneliness, for the fear, for not knowing if he was strong enough for what came next. The tears came hard and silent, his body shaking with the force of them. He cried until he had nothing left, until he was empty and exhausted and wrung out. Then he wiped his eyes and stood up. Crying wouldn't change anything, wouldn't bring Ruth back, wouldn't make tomorrow easier. But it helped. A little. Isaiah carefully lifted Nia and carried her to the bedroom. He tucked her into bed and kissed her forehead. She stirred but didn't wake. He went back for Eli. His son was heavier, growing so fast. Isaiah carried him to his bed and pulled the blanket over him. "Dad?" Eli's eyes opened halfway. "Yeah, buddy." "Are you okay?" "I'm okay. Go back to sleep." "You were crying." Isaiah paused. No use lying. "Yeah, I was." "It's okay to cry." "I know. Mama said you don't cry enough, that you keep everything inside." Isaiah felt his throat tighten again. Of course, Ruth had noticed. She noticed everything. She was probably right. She usually was. Eli's eyes drifted closed. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, buddy." Isaiah walked to his own bedroom and stood in the doorway. The bed was made. Ruth's pillow still had the indent from where she'd last slept there 3 weeks ago before the final hospital stay. He couldn't go in. Not yet. Instead, he went back to the living room and lay down on the couch. He pulled the throw blanket over himself and stared at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept replaying the day. Margaret's cold assessment. The whispers. Ruth's letter. The looks on people's faces when they realized they'd been wrong about him. He'd proven himself today. Shown everyone that Ruth's choice had been real, valid, based on love, not desperation or rebellion. But the victory felt hollow. Because what did it matter what Margaret or anyone else thought? Ruth was still gone. The approval he'd finally earned came too late to change anything. Isaiah's phone buzzed again. Another text from Grace. "Mom wants to talk tomorrow. She won't say it, but I think she's shaken." The letter really affected her. He typed back, "I'm not ready." Grace's response came quickly. "I understand. Take your time. But I think she's finally starting to see what Ruth saw in you." Isaiah put the phone aside and closed his eyes. What Ruth saw in him. A question that had haunted him from the beginning. Why had she chosen him? A bus mechanic from the wrong side of town with grease under his fingernails and a high school education. Ruth could have had anyone. Someone from her world. Someone who fit. Someone her parents would have celebrated instead of tolerated. But she'd chosen him. And for 8 years, he'd tried to be worthy of that choice. Tried to prove he deserved her. Tried to silence the voice in his head that said he wasn't enough. Now she was gone, and the question remained. Had he been enough? Had he given her a good life? Had she died happy? Or did she have regrets she'd been too kind to voice? The letter said no regrets. Said she'd been happy. Said their simple life had been her greatest achievement. Isaiah wanted to believe it, needed to believe it. But doubt was a persistent thing. He must have dozed off eventually because he woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of something burning. Isaiah sat up quickly, his heart racing. Smoke. He ran to the kitchen and found Eli standing at the stove with a spatula, looking panicked. The pan was smoking, eggs burned black and stuck to the bottom. "Buddy, what are you doing?" "I was trying to make breakfast, like Mama used to." Eli's voice cracked. "But I can't. I don't know how." Isaiah turned off the burner and moved the pan to a cool spot. He opened the window to let out the smoke. "It's okay. You tried. That's what matters. But I messed it up. I mess everything up. Hey." Isaiah knelt down to Eli's level. "You didn't mess anything up. Cooking eggs is hard. I burn them half the time, too." "Really?" "Really. Why do you think Mama always made breakfast?" Eli managed a small smile. Then it faded. "I miss her, Dad." "I know. Buddy, I miss her, too." "Is it always going to hurt this much?" Isaiah wanted to lie, wanted to say, "No, it gets easier. You'll be fine." but he couldn't. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Probably not always this much, but we're always going to miss her. That's okay. Missing her means we loved her." Eli nodded and wiped his eyes. "What are we going to do for breakfast? How about cereal?" "Okay." They poured bowls of cereal and sat at the kitchen table. Nia wandered out a few minutes later, her hair a mess, her pajamas twisted. "Morning, baby girl," Isaiah said. "Morning, Daddy." She climbed into her chair. "Can I have cereal too?" "Of course." They ate together in the morning sunlight. Simple, ordinary. The first breakfast of their new life. Isaiah's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Margaret. He let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text. "We need to discuss the children's welfare. Call me." Isaiah put the phone face down on the table. "Who was that?" Eli asked. "Grandma." "What does she want?" "To talk." "Are you going to?" "Not today." Eli looked relieved. They finished breakfast and Isaiah sent the kids to get dressed. While they were occupied, he listened to Margaret's voicemail. "Isaiah, we need to talk about arrangements. The children need stability, structure. I'd like to discuss having them stay with us for a while, just until you get your feet under you. It would be best for everyone. Call me back." Isaiah deleted the message. No, absolutely not. His children were not going anywhere. He called Grace instead. "Isaiah, hi." She sounded tired. "How are you?" "Your mother just called. She wants to take the kids." Grace sighed. "I was afraid of that. She mentioned it last night. It's not happening." "I know, and I told her that, but you know how she is. Once she gets an idea—" "Grace, I need you to understand something. I'm their father. They're staying with me." End of discussion. "I agree with you completely. I'm on your side." She paused. "But Isaiah, she's not going to let this go easily. She thinks she's doing the right thing. She thinks I'm not capable. She thinks you're grieving and overwhelmed and the kids need more than you can give right now. And what do you think?" Grace was quiet for a moment. "I think Ruth chose you for a reason. I think you're stronger than my mother gives you credit for. And I think those kids need their father, not their grandmother's idea of proper upbringing." Isaiah felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Just stand your ground. And if you need backup, call me." After they hung up, Isaiah sat at the kitchen table and tried to think. Margaret had money, resources, connections. If she really pushed, could she make a case for custody? No. He was their father. He had rights. But the doubt crept in anyway. Was he being selfish? Would the kids be better off with Margaret and Thomas? They had a big house, could provide opportunities, good schools, everything Isaiah couldn't. But they didn't have love. Not the kind Ruth had given. Not the kind Isaiah gave every single day. The kids came back into the living room, dressed and ready for the day, even though there was nowhere to go. "Dad?" Nia climbed into his lap. "Can we go to the park?" "You want to go to the park?" "Yeah, Mama used to take us on Sundays. I miss it." Isaiah looked at her hopeful face, at Eli hovering nearby, trying to act like he didn't care, but clearly wanting the same thing. "Okay," Isaiah said. "Let's go to the park." The park was busy with Sunday afternoon families, kids on swings, parents pushing strollers, dogs chasing frisbees, normal weekend activity. Isaiah sat on a bench and watched his children play, Nia on the slide, Eli on the monkey bars, trying to impress his sister with how far he could go without falling. They looked happy. For the first time since Ruth died, they looked like kids again instead of small adults carrying too much weight. Isaiah's phone buzzed. Another text from Margaret. "I'm coming by tomorrow evening. We need to talk. This isn't negotiable." He typed back, "The kids and I are fine. We don't need to talk." Her response was immediate. "I'm their grandmother. I have a right to ensure their welfare. 6 p.m. tomorrow." Isaiah stared at the message. She wasn't asking. She was telling. Fine. Let her come. Let her see that the kids were okay, that Isaiah was managing, that they didn't need her interference. He put the phone away and focused on his children. Nia waved from the top of the slide. "Daddy, watch." "I'm watching, baby." She slid down with a squeal of delight, ran back to do it again. Eli made it all the way across the monkey bars and dropped to the ground, grinning. "Did you see?" "I saw. That was great, buddy." For a moment, just a brief moment, things felt almost normal. Then Nia asked, "Can Mama come to the park next time?" The question hit Isaiah like a punch to the chest. Eli froze on the monkey bars. Isaiah motioned for both kids to come over. They sat on either side of him on the bench. "Mama can't come to the park anymore, baby girl. You remember? We talked about this." "I know." Nia's voice was small. "But I forget sometimes. I wake up and I think she's in the kitchen. And then I remember and it hurts again." "I know. I do the same thing." "You do?" "Yeah. This morning I almost called for her. Had to remind myself she's gone." Eli spoke up quietly. "I keep her picture by my bed so I don't forget what she looks like." Isaiah pulled both children close. "You're never going to forget what she looks like, or how she sounded, or how much she loved you. That's always going to be with you." "Promise?" Nia asked. "Promise." They sat together on the bench while other families played around them. Isaiah held his children and tried to be strong enough for all three of them. A woman approached with a sympathetic smile. "Are you the Walkers?" Isaiah looked up warily. "Yes?" "I knew Ruth from the clinic. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you. If there's anything you need," I know people say that and don't mean it, but I do. Ruth was always so kind to my daughter. I'd like to return that kindness." Isaiah felt his throat tighten. "That's really kind of you. Thank you." The woman squeezed his shoulder and walked away. Two more people stopped to offer condolences. People who'd known Ruth, who'd been touched by her kindness, who wanted Isaiah to know he wasn't alone. By the time they left the park, Isaiah felt a little less empty, a little less isolated. They had a community, people who cared. It wasn't the same as having Ruth, but it was something. That evening, Isaiah made spaghetti for dinner. The kids helped, Nia stirring the sauce while Eli set the table. Simple tasks that gave them something to do with their hands. They ate together at the kitchen table. The chair where Ruth used to sit remained empty. A ghost at their table. "Dad?" Eli asked. "What are we going to do tomorrow?" "I have to go back to work. Mrs. Chen from downstairs said she'd watch you after school." "We have to go to school tomorrow?" "Yeah, buddy. Can't stay home forever." "But what if? What if the kids ask questions? About Mama?" Isaiah hadn't thought about that. About his children facing their classmates, about the questions and the sympathy and the awkwardness. "Tell them the truth, that your Mama passed away and you miss her, and if anyone's mean about it, you tell the teacher." "What if I cry?" "Then you cry. There's no shame in that." Eli didn't look convinced, but nodded anyway. After dinner, they watched a movie together. Something animated and cheerful that none of them really paid attention to. They just sat close on the couch, holding on to each other. When it was time for bed, Isaiah tucked them both in, read them a story, kissed their foreheads. "Love you," he said to each of them. "Love you too, Daddy," Nia murmured, already half asleep. "Love you, Dad," Eli said. Isaiah turned off the lights and went to his own room. He stood in the doorway again, still unable to go in. Instead, he pulled Ruth's pillow off the bed and brought it to the couch, lay down and held it close, breathing in the fading scent of her shampoo. Tomorrow, Margaret would come, would try to take control, would question everything about how he was raising the kids. And he'd have to stand firm, have to prove that he was capable, that the kids belonged with him. Isaiah closed his eyes and tried to find the strength Ruth had always said he had. The strength her letter talked about. The strength he'd need to keep his family together. He fell asleep holding her pillow, and in his dreams, Ruth was still alive, still laughing, still his. Monday morning came too early. Isaiah woke before dawn, disoriented for a moment before reality crashed back in. Work, school, life continuing whether he was ready or not. He got up quietly and went to the kitchen, made coffee, stared out the window at the dark street below. Somewhere in the city, buses were already running their early routes. His co-workers were already at the depot, checking engines and changing oil and doing the work that kept the city moving. Isaiah had taken a week off, bereavement leave, 7 days to bury his wife and figure out how to breathe again. Now, those 7 days were up. He heard small footsteps behind him, turned to find Nia in the doorway, her stuffed elephant dragging on the floor. "Morning, baby girl, you're up early." Couldn't sleep. She climbed onto a kitchen chair. "Do I have to go to school?" "Yeah, you do. But I don't want to." Isaiah sat down next to her. "I know. But staying home won't make it easier. And your teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, she knows about Mama. She'll be gentle with you." "What if I cry?" "Then you cry. And Mrs. Rodriguez will help you feel better." Nia looked unconvinced but nodded. Eli appeared next, already dressed in jeans and a hoodie. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there a month ago. "Morning, buddy." "Morning." Eli went to the cabinet and pulled out cereal, poured himself a bowl without being asked. Isaiah watched his 9-year-old son move through the morning routine with mechanical precision. No emotion, just going through the motions. "You okay?" Isaiah asked. "Fine." Eli. His son stopped mid-bite. "What do you want me to say, Dad? That I'm scared to go back to school? That I don't want people looking at me weird? That I wish Mama was here to make everything okay?" The words came out harsh, angry, not at Isaiah, but at the world, at the unfairness of it all. "Yeah," Isaiah said quietly. "That's exactly what I want you to say, because it's the truth." Eli's shoulders slumped. The anger drained out of him, replaced by something worse. Defeat. "I'm tired of being sad," he whispered. "I know, buddy. Me too." They finished breakfast in heavy silence. Isaiah helped Nia get dressed and made sure both kids had their backpacks ready. He found permission slips that needed signing and lunch money that needed counting. All the small tasks Ruth used to handle, all the details Isaiah had to remember now. At 7:30, they left the apartment together. The morning was cold, gray clouds promising rain. They walked to the bus stop 2 blocks away, and Isaiah waited with them until the school bus arrived. "I'll pick you up after school," he told them. "Mrs. Chen will be there if I'm running late." "Okay," they said together. Isaiah hugged them both, held on a little longer than usual. "I love you. Be brave." "Love you too," Nia said. Eli just nodded and got on the bus. Isaiah watched the bus pull away, carrying his children into a world that would ask questions and offer sympathy and make everything harder than it needed to be. Then he turned and walked toward the bus stop that would take him to work. The depot smelled like diesel fuel and motor oil and years of accumulated grime. Isaiah changed into his work coveralls and grabbed his toolbox. His supervisor, Marcus, found him before he could get to his first assignment. "Walker, good to have you back." Marcus was a big man with a gray beard and kind eyes. "How you holding up?" "I'm here." "That's not what I asked." Isaiah set down his toolbox. "I'm managing, taking it one day at a time." Marcus nodded slowly. "Listen, if you need more time, I don't. I need to work, need to keep busy." "All right, but if it gets to be too much, you tell me. No shame in needing a break." "I will. Thanks, Marcus." His first job was a transmission issue on Bus 47. Isaiah climbed underneath and got to work, letting the familiar routine take over. Diagnose the problem, find the broken part, fix it, move on. Mechanical problems had solutions, clear, logical solutions, not like grief. Not like raising children alone, not like figuring out how to be enough when you felt like you were barely holding on. His co-workers gave him space. A few offered quiet condolences. Most just left him alone, which he appreciated. At lunch, Isaiah sat in the break room with a sandwich he'd made that morning. Peanut butter and jelly, the same thing he'd packed for the kids. His phone rang. The school. His heart jumped. "Mr. Walker? This is Principal Hayes. Everything's fine, but we wanted to let you know that Naya had a difficult moment this morning. She's okay now, but she asked for you." Isaiah was already standing. "I'll be right there." "You don't have to come. Mrs. Rodriguez got her settled. But we thought you should know." "I'm coming anyway." Isaiah told Marcus he had to leave. Didn't wait for approval. Just clocked out and caught the next bus to the elementary school. He found Nia in the nurse's office, sitting on the cot with red eyes and a tear-stained face. She saw him and burst into fresh tears. "Daddy!" Isaiah scooped her up and held her tight. "I'm here, baby girl. I'm here." I couldn't stop crying. Everyone was looking at me. "It's okay. You didn't do anything wrong." Mrs. Rodriguez stood in the doorway, her expression gentle and concerned. She was doing fine until we started circle time. One of the kids asked where her mother was, and Nia just broke down. Isaiah nodded, his throat tight. "Can I take her home?" "Of course. Whatever she needs." Isaiah signed her out, and they walked to the bus stop together, Nia's small hand gripping his tightly. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered. "For what?" "For making you leave work." "Hey." Isaiah knelt down to her level right there on the sidewalk. "You listen to me. You are the most important thing in the world to me. More important than any job. If you need me, I will always come. Always. You understand?" Nia nodded, fresh tears falling. "Good. Now let's go home." They spent the afternoon on the couch watching cartoons. Isaiah called the school to check on Eli. His son had made it through the day without incident, they said. He was quiet, but managing. At 3 o'clock, Mrs. Chen called. "I'm at the school to get Eli. Do you want me to bring him home?" "Yes, please, thank you." Eli arrived 20 minutes later, his face carefully neutral. He saw Nia on the couch and his expression shifted to concern. "You okay?" he asked his sister. "I had a sad day," Nia said simply. "Yeah, me too." Eli sat down next to her. They leaned against each other, finding comfort in closeness. Isaiah thanked Mrs. Chen and closed the door. He looked at his children on the couch and felt the weight of everything crushing down on him. One day back to normal life, and it was already falling apart. His phone buzzed, a text from Margaret. "I'll be there at 6. Make sure the children are presentable." Isaiah looked at the time. 4:30, an hour and a half to prepare for battle. He ordered pizza for dinner. Didn't have the energy to cook. While they waited for delivery, he had the kids clean up their rooms and change into fresh clothes. "Why do we have to get dressed up?" Eli asked. "Grandma's coming over." Eli's face darkened. "Why?" "She wants to check on us." "We don't need her to check on us. We're fine." "I know, buddy, but we're going to be polite anyway." The pizza arrived at 5:30. They ate quickly, and Isaiah cleaned up the kitchen, made sure there were no dishes in the sink, no clutter on the counters, everything tidy and in its place. He hated that he felt the need to prove himself, hated that Margaret's visit made him feel like he was being inspected. But he did it anyway. At exactly 6 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. Isaiah opened it to find Margaret standing in the hallway. She wore a tailored pantsuit and carried a designer handbag. Behind her stood Thomas, looking uncomfortable as always. "Margaret, Thomas, come in." Margaret walked past him without greeting, her eyes already scanning the apartment. taking inventory, judging. Thomas gave Isaiah a small nod. Isaiah. Thomas. Margaret stood in the middle of the living room, looking around like she was assessing property damage. It's smaller than I remembered. It's home, Isaiah said evenly. Yes. Well. She turned to face him. Where are the children? In their room. I'll get them. Let me. Margaret walked toward the bedroom before Isaiah could stop her. He followed, tension building in his shoulders. Margaret opened the door to find both kids sitting on Eli's bed. They looked up with wide eyes. Grandma, Nia said quietly. Hello, children. Margaret's voice softened slightly. Come here. Nia went to her grandmother reluctantly. Margaret knelt down, actually knelt, and looked at her granddaughter's face. You've been crying. I had a sad day at school. I see. Margaret glanced at Isaiah, her expression unreadable. And how are you, Eli? Okay. Just okay? Eli shrugged. Margaret stood and faced Isaiah. Can we speak privately? Kids, go watch TV for a bit, Isaiah said. They left quickly, clearly relieved. Margaret closed the bedroom door. Thomas stood by awkwardly, not meeting anyone's eyes. This isn't working, Margaret said without preamble. Excuse me? This. She gestured around the room. You're overwhelmed. The children are suffering. Nia had a breakdown at school today. She had a hard moment. She's grieving, that's normal. Is it normal for you to leave work to pick her up? How many times can you do that before you lose your job? Isaiah felt anger rising. I will never be too busy for my children. Noble, but impractical. Margaret crossed her arms. Thomas and I have been discussing this. We think the children should come stay with us, just temporarily, until you get your feet under you. No. Isaiah, be reasonable. We have the space, the resources. We can provide stability. They have stability. They have me. They have their home. A home you can barely afford. A job that doesn't give you flexibility. A life that's held together by thread. Margaret's voice was cold, clinical. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm being practical. These children need more than you can give them right now. What they need is their father. What they need is proper care. Isaiah took a step toward her, not threatening, just making sure she heard him clearly. I am their father. Ruth was my wife. We built this life together, and I will not let you take it apart because you think I'm not good enough. This isn't about being good enough. Yes, it is. It always has been. You never thought I was good enough for Ruth. You made that clear from day one. And now that she's gone, you think you can swoop in and fix everything according to your standards. Isaiah's voice shook but held firm. But Ruth chose this life. She chose me. She chose this apartment and our simple way of living, and she was happy. Her letter made that clear. Margaret flinched at the mention of the letter. Ruth wasn't thinking clearly. Ruth was the clearest thinker I've ever known. She knew exactly what she wanted and what she was choosing. Thomas finally spoke up. Isaiah's right, Margaret. Margaret turned to her husband in shock. Excuse me? He's right. Ruth made her choice, and we should respect it. Are you serious right now? Those children need their father. They need their father. Thomas looked at Isaiah with something like respect. And from what I saw at the funeral, he's doing a damn fine job. Margaret's face flushed red. We'll discuss this later. No, we won't. Thomas straightened his shoulders. I stood by while you criticized Ruth's choices. I stayed silent when you made Isaiah feel like he wasn't welcome in this family. I'm not doing that anymore. He looked at Isaiah. I'm sorry for not speaking up sooner, for letting Margaret make you feel less than. Isaiah didn't know what to say. Thomas had never stood up to his wife, never defended anyone. Margaret stared at her husband like he'd grown a second head. Thomas, the children stay with their father. Thomas's voice was firm, Final. That's the end of it. Silence filled the small bedroom. Margaret's composure cracked. Just for a moment, Isaiah saw past the cold exterior to the grief beneath. The mother who'd lost her daughter. The grandmother who was terrified of losing more. "I just want them to be okay," she said quietly. "So do I," Isaiah replied. "We want the same thing, Margaret. We just disagree on how to get there." Margaret looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Fine. They stay with you, but I will be checking in regularly." "That's fair. The kids should know their grandmother. And if things become too difficult, then I'll ask for help, but on my terms." Margaret didn't like it. Isaiah could see the struggle on her face, but finally, she nodded. "All right." They walked back to the living room. The kids were on the couch watching them nervously. Margaret went to them. This time, she sat down on the coffee table so she was at their eye level. "Your father and I have come to an understanding," she said. "You're going to stay here with him, but I'd like to visit you sometimes. Would that be all right?" Nia nodded slowly. Eli looked at his father for confirmation. Isaiah nodded. "Okay," Eli said. "Good." Margaret stood. She looked at Isaiah. "I'll call later this week to arrange a proper visit." "Okay." Thomas shook Isaiah's hand. "Take care of yourself. And them." "I will." After they left, Isaiah locked the door and leaned against it. His whole body was shaking. Eli appeared beside him. "Did we win?" Isaiah looked down at his son. "Yeah, buddy, we won." "Good." Eli hugged him tight. "I didn't want to leave." "You're not going anywhere. None of us are." The rest of the week passed in a blur of new routines. Isaiah dropped the kids at school every morning, worked his shift at the depot, picked them up every afternoon, made dinner, helped with homework, read bedtime stories. It was exhausting. Every single day felt like running a marathon. But they were managing. Nia had 2 more hard days at school, but didn't break down again. Eli stayed quiet, but started talking a little more at dinner. Small steps, tiny victories. On Friday night, Isaiah's phone rang. Grace. "Hey," she said when he answered. "How's it going?" "We're surviving." "That's good. Better than expected, honestly." She paused. "I wanted to tell you something. Mom called me yesterday." She was crying. Isaiah sat up straighter. "Crying?" "Yeah. First time I've heard her cry since Ruth died. She said Thomas stood up to her, really stood up to her, and it shook her. I didn't mean to cause problems between them." "You didn't. This has been a long time coming. Dad's been holding back for years." Grace sighed. "But the point is, Mom's starting to see things differently." She actually said the words, "Maybe I was wrong about Isaiah." Isaiah felt something loosen in his chest. "Really? Really? It's going to take time. She's stubborn as hell, but I think the wall is starting to crack." That's good, I think." "It is good. It means the kids can have a relationship with their grandmother without the tension. It means you might actually get some support instead of criticism." After they hung up, Isaiah sat on the couch and stared at nothing. Maybe I was wrong about Isaiah. 6 words, simple words, but they carried weight he hadn't expected. He thought about the funeral, about Ruth's letter, about the moment Margaret's mask had cracked and the grief showed through. She was just a mother who'd lost her daughter, a grandmother terrified of losing her grandchildren. She'd been cruel because she didn't know how else to be. Isaiah didn't forgive her. Not completely, but he understood her a little better. Saturday morning, Isaiah woke to both kids bouncing on his bed. "Dad, wake up!" Nia was laughing, actually laughing. Isaiah opened his eyes. "What's going on?" We want pancakes, and we want to make them ourselves." "By yourselves?" "You can help a little," Eli said, "but we want to do most of it." Isaiah sat up and rubbed his eyes. "Okay, let's make pancakes." They went to the kitchen together. Isaiah pulled out the mix and showed them how to measure ingredients, how to crack eggs without getting shells in the batter, how to know when to flip. Eli took it seriously, measuring everything precisely. Nia made a mess and didn't care. The first batch burned. The second batch came out lumpy. The third batch was almost perfect. They sat at the table and ate their imperfect pancakes with too much syrup. "These are good," Nia declared. "Mama's were better," Eli said honestly. "Yeah," Isaiah agreed. "But these are pretty good too." They ate in comfortable silence. Isaiah looked at his children and felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Just for a moment. Just enough to remind him that this was possible. That afternoon, Grace called. "Are you busy tomorrow?" "Not particularly. Why?" "I was thinking of coming by, bringing lunch, spending some time with the kids, if that's okay." "Yeah, that would be nice." "Great. I'll see you around noon." Sunday came bright and clear. Grace arrived with bags of takeout from a local diner. The kids' faces lit up when they saw their aunt. "Aunt Grace!" She hugged them both tight. "Hey, kiddos, I missed you." They ate lunch together, and Grace told stories about Ruth when she was young. Funny stories that made the kids laugh. Stories that made Ruth feel present instead of gone. "Your mama once convinced me to dye my hair pink," Grace said. "We were teenagers and I was so nervous, but she said, life's too short to play it safe. So we did it. Our parents were furious." Nia giggled. "Mama had pink hair?" "Just the tips. And only for a week before our parents made her dye it back. But she loved it. Said it made her feel brave." After lunch, Grace helped the kids with a puzzle while Isaiah cleaned up. He watched them from the kitchen. This small scene of normalcy. When Grace was getting ready to leave, she pulled Isaiah aside. "You're doing great," she said quietly. "I know it doesn't feel like it, but you are. Thanks. I mean it. Those kids are lucky to have you." After she left, Isaiah sat with that. Lucky to have him. Not just surviving him, not just making do. Lucky. Maybe it was true. Maybe he was doing better than he thought. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Not easy, not comfortable, but manageable. Isaiah worked. The kids went to school. They had dinner together every night. They talked about their days. They remembered Ruth without the memories destroying them. Margaret called once a week. Short calls, polite. She asked about the kids and didn't criticize. It was progress. Thomas called too, separately. He took the kids to a movie one Saturday. Brought them home with ice cream stains and genuine smiles. Grace visited regularly. She became a bridge between Isaiah and the Holloways, a translator for two sides learning to understand each other. One night, about a month after the funeral, Isaiah was tucking Nia into bed when she said, "Daddy, I'm not as sad anymore. Is that okay?" Isaiah brushed hair from her face. "That's more than okay, baby girl. That's healing. But I don't want to forget Mama." "You won't. Being less sad doesn't mean forgetting. It just means you're learning to carry the sadness instead of letting it carry you." Nia thought about that. "Like a backpack?" "Exactly like a backpack. It's still there, but you're strong enough to carry it now." "Okay." She hugged her elephant close. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too." In his own room later, Isaiah pulled out Ruth's letter and read it again. He'd read it dozens of times now, knew it by heart. "Choosing you was the best decision I ever made." He folded it carefully and put it back in his drawer. Then he did something he hadn't done since she died. He slept in their bed, not on the couch, not avoiding the space she'd left empty. Actually, in the bed they'd shared, it hurt, but it also felt right, like claiming his life back, like honoring what they'd had instead of running from it. Isaiah turned off the light and closed his eyes. Tomorrow he'd wake up early, get the kids ready for school, go to work, come home, make dinner, do it all again. The simple life Ruth had chosen, the life she'd said was her greatest achievement. And for the first time since she died, Isaiah believed her. This life, this small, ordinary, beautiful life, was worth everything. He'd proven it at the funeral, proven it to Margaret, proven it to everyone who doubted, but more importantly, he'd proven it to himself. He was enough. For his kids, for Ruth's memory, for the life they were building without her. Not perfect, not easy, but enough. Isaiah fell asleep with that knowledge settling warm in his chest, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't dream of loss. He dreamed of tomorrow, of his children laughing, of burnt pancakes and homework struggles and bedtime stories, of the small sacred moments that made life worth living. He dreamed of Ruth, but not with pain, with gratitude, for the years they'd had, for the love they'd shared, for the choice she'd made that everyone questioned but never regretted. Outside his window, the city slept. Inside his apartment, his children dreamed their own dreams. And Isaiah Walker, bus mechanic, single father, the man Ruth chose, finally found peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because he'd learned the truth Ruth always knew. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. Every single day, no matter how hard it gets, and that's exactly what he'd keep doing, for his kids, for Ruth's memory, for the simple, beautiful life they'd built together, forever.